but the courage and sacrifice of our servicemen and women, and the way communities came together in the face of such great challenge, carry a timeless message for us all. These are the values which have shaped our country and the Commonwealth.
The palace gates slammed shut behind Queen Camilla. King Charles discovered something so shocking, so unforgivable, that her crown was ripped away overnight. Caught red-handed in a scandal that goes beyond betrayal. Stolen royal jewels, secret affairs. A conspiracy that targeted Princess Diana's own legacy. No press conference, no mercy, just exile.
Are lucky enough to spend precious time each year in Aberdeenshire. And finally, because 10 years ago, I received the great honour of being installed as Chancellor of this very special university.
What she did will make your blood boil. The truth they tried to hide is finally exposed, and it's far worse than anyone imagined. In the early morning hours of June the 25th, 2025, Buckingham Palace appeared as it always did, with guards performing their routine duties and the daily rhythms of royal life unfolding as expected. However, within the private chambers of King Charles III, something was about to shift the course of recent royal history. What began as an ordinary morning would soon reveal a situation that no one in the palace had anticipated. King Charles had started his day in the usual manner, reaching for his customary cup of grey tea while reviewing the documents that had been prepared for him. Among the standard paperwork sat a plain folder, unmarked and seemingly unremarkable. Yet this folder would prove to be anything but ordinary. Inside were photographs, high-quality images with clear date stamps ranging from May 11th through May 13th, 2025. The location was identified as a private estate situated near Windsor, a place known for its discretion and seclusion. The woman in the photographs was immediately recognizable as Queen Camilla. The man beside her was Edward Langley, a figure who had served within the royal household for many years, known for his reliability and trusted position. The images captured moments that went beyond professional interaction or casual friendship. They were embraced in private rooms, glasses of wine shared in intimate settings, and body language that suggested a relationship far more personal than anything that could be explained away as mere collegiality. What made these photographs particularly troubling was the timeline. During the exact period these images were taken, Camilla had informed Charles that she would be attending a solo wellness retreat, a personal getaway meant for reflection and rejuvenation. She had emphasized her need for peace and solitude, away from the demands of royal life. Charles had respected her request for privacy, believing she was taking time for herself. The reality captured in these photographs told an entirely different story. The discovery left Charles in a state of profound shock. His first instinct was to search for an explanation, some context that might make sense of what he was seeing. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding, or the images had been taken out of context. However, the source of these photographs made denial difficult. They had not come from tabloid journalists or intrusive paparazzi seeking a scandal. Instead, they had been compiled by the palace's own internal security team, a group that rarely spoke publicly about their work but maintained meticulous records of activities that might pose risks to the royal family. The security documentation that accompanied the photographs was thorough and precise. Edward Langley's presence at the Windsor estate had been verified through multiple sources, including travel records that confirmed his arrival and departure times. The evidence was not circumstantial or ambiguous. It was concrete, time-stamped, and verified through channels that Charles had no reason to doubt. Every detail pointed to the same conclusion, that Camilla had been deliberately deceptive about her whereabouts and her companions during those days in May. As difficult as the personal betrayal was to process, Charles soon learned that the situation extended beyond infidelity. The investigation that followed revealed concerning patterns related to royal property and historical artifacts. According to palace records, Camilla had accessed the royal heirloom vault on April 22nd, 2025. Such visits were not entirely unusual, as members of the royal family occasionally reviewed items for heritage documentation or ceremonial purposes. However, this particular visit raised questions when cross-referenced with subsequent events. Security footage and logistical records indicated that during the week of Camilla's vault access, a locked trunk had left palace grounds in her possession. This movement had occurred without the proper documentation that typically accompanied the transport of royal items. No authorization forms had been filed, and no staff members had been informed of the trunk's removal. In the careful world of royal protocol, where nearly every action is recorded and approved, such an omission was highly irregular. Investigators traced the trunk's path and discovered that it had been taken to the same private suite near Windsor where Camilla had spent time with Edward Langley. During their stay at this location, staff members had been instructed to stay away from certain areas, and no housekeeping or service personnel had entered the rooms where the trunk was kept. Surveillance from outside the property showed Camilla's vehicle parked at the suite on April the 23rd for approximately 1 hour. During this time, the trunk was unloaded from the car, but notably, it was never seen being returned to the vehicle when she departed. As weeks passed and the investigation expanded, a detailed report was compiled and delivered to Charles on July 1, 2025. The findings were presented in clear, direct language that left little room for interpretation. The report documented that Camilla had entered the vault using an override code that should not have been operational. This particular access code had been deactivated in 2014 and was not supposed to work under any circumstances. The fact that it had been successfully used raised questions about how Camilla had obtained or reactivated the code. More troubling still were the contents of the report, regarding specific items that had been stored in the vault. Two pieces of exceptional historical and emotional significance were noted as missing. The first was a pair of pearl and diamond earrings that had belonged to Princess Diana, a gift she had received during her lifetime. The second was the Spencer choker, another item intimately connected to Diana's memory and legacy. Together, these pieces were valued at more than £650,000, though their sentimental and historical worth far exceeded any monetary assessment. For Charles, the disappearance of Diana's belongings represented more than theft. These were items meant to be preserved as part of the royal collection, pieces that carried the memory of a woman whose death had shaken the nation and whose sons still grieved her loss. The thought that these heirlooms had been removed from their protected storage and taken without authorization struck at something far deeper than material value. Additional evidence emerged from Clarence House, where camera footage revealed Camilla's car parked near a loading area for 45 minutes on the same day she had accessed the vault. Again, no paperwork had been filed to explain this activity, and no official reason had been provided for the vehicle's presence in that location. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. What had initially appeared as a personal betrayal was revealing itself to be something more calculated and deliberate. The investigation also uncovered digital communications that painted a fuller picture of what had transpired. Messages found on Camilla's secure tablet, typically used for official correspondence, contained exchanges with Edward Langley that went beyond romantic involvement. The tone and content of these messages suggested discussions about freedom, about possession of certain items, and about plans that had never included returning what had been taken. There was no indication in any of the communications that Camilla intended to restore the trunk or its contents to the palace. Charles found himself confronting a reality he had never imagined. The woman who had stood beside him through years of public scrutiny, who had worked to rehabilitate her image and build a place within the royal family, had been operating in secret. The betrayal was not a single impulsive mistake, but appeared to be part of a longer pattern of actions taken deliberately and hidden carefully. The evidence now spread before him told a story of deception that had unfolded over months, perhaps longer, all while maintaining the appearance of loyalty and partnership. What struck Charles most painfully was the violation of Diana's memory. The items that had been taken were not random pieces of jewelry. They were specifically connected to his first wife, to the mother of his sons, to a woman whose legacy remained powerful in the hearts of the British people. Taking these particular items felt like an erasure of history, an attempt to claim or control something that should have remained untouchable. The evidence that had accumulated regarding the missing heirlooms prompted Charles to authorize a more comprehensive investigation. What began as an inquiry into unauthorized vault access soon expanded into a detailed examination of Camilla's movements and activities over several months. The investigators worked quietly, reviewing security footage, cross-referencing travel records, and interviewing staff members who might have witnessed relevant events. Their work was methodical and discreet, conducted with the understanding that what they uncovered could have profound implications for the monarchy. The investigation revealed that Camilla's access to the royal vault had not been a single isolated incident. Records showed multiple entries between April 18th and April 22nd, each time using the override code that should have been inactive. On one particular visit, she had signed into the vault at precisely 9:42 in the morning and had not departed until after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The extended duration of this visit stood out to investigators as unusual, especially given that no official purpose had been documented for her presence there. What made the situation even more complex was the discovery that certain items had begun appearing in public settings under circumstances that raised questions. Palace staff who monitored social media and public appearances had noticed something troubling at a charity event in late April. Laura Lopes, Camilla's daughter, had been photographed wearing a distinctive pair of pearl earrings. The earrings were notable not just for their beauty, but for their very specific design, a style that matched items known to be part of the Diana collections stored in the royal vault. The photographs from the event were examined by experts familiar with the royal jewelry collection. The consensus among these specialists was unanimous. The earrings worn by Laura Lopes were either the authentic pieces from the vault or replicas of such exceptional quality that distinguishing them from the originals would require physical examination. Given the security surrounding royal jewelry and the extreme rarity of high-quality replicas, the likelihood pointed strongly toward these being the genuine articles. This discovery added a new dimension to the investigation. It was no longer simply about items being removed from the vault. Now there was evidence suggesting that these pieces had been given to family members outside the immediate royal household, individuals who had no legitimate claim to items that were meant to remain part of the Crown's protected collection. The act of transferring such items represented not just theft, but a fundamental misunderstanding or disregard for what these pieces represented in terms of national heritage and family legacy. As the investigation continued, communications between Camilla and Edward Langley were examined more closely. The messages, while often brief, revealed a relationship that extended beyond romance into discussions of material concerns. There were references to possessions, to items that needed to be kept safe, and to plans that involved maintaining control over certain valuables. The language used suggested that both parties understood they were engaged in activities that needed to remain hidden from palace authorities and from Charles himself. One message in particular caught the attention of investigators. In it, Camilla made reference to things that belonged to her by right, items she felt entitled to possess regardless of their official designation as Crown property. The message suggested a worldview in which the boundaries between personal property and royal heritage had become blurred, or perhaps had never been clearly understood. This sense of entitlement, combined with the means and access to act on it, had created the conditions for what had transpired. By late June, Charles could no longer avoid the reality of what the evidence was showing him. The pattern was too clear, too well documented, to dismiss or explain away. The woman he had married, the woman who had become Queen Consort, had violated the trust placed in her in multiple ways. She had been unfaithful, yes, but she had also taken items of immense historical and emotional significance. Items connected to Diana that should have been preserved for future generations and especially for William and Harry, Diana's sons. Charles spent several days reviewing all the evidence that had been compiled. He read through reports late into the night, examined photographs and documents, and consulted with his most trusted advisors about how to proceed. The decision he faced was not simply about his personal feelings or his marriage. He was the king, and the actions he took would reflect on the institution of the monarchy itself. He needed to balance his private pain with his public responsibilities, and he needed to ensure that whatever steps he took would protect the integrity of the crown. The confrontation, when it finally came, took place on the evening of July 1st, 2025. Charles requested that Camilla meet him in the Blue Room, one of the private chambers within Buckingham Palace that afforded complete privacy. The meeting was not scheduled through official channels, and staff members were instructed to ensure that the two would not be disturbed. What followed was a conversation that lasted several hours, though conversation might not be the appropriate word for an exchange that was more interrogation than dialogue. Charles entered the room carrying several folders containing the evidence that had been gathered. He placed them on the table between where he and Camilla sat, allowing the weight of their contents to establish the seriousness of the moment before any words were spoken. When he finally did speak, His voice was controlled but carried an edge of pain that no amount of royal training could completely mask. He asked direct questions about the photographs from Windsor, about her time with Edward Langley, and about the activities she had claimed were a private wellness retreat. Camilla's responses were initially defensive and evasive. She attempted to characterize Edward as an old friend, someone she had known for years in a purely platonic capacity. She suggested that the photographs had been misinterpreted, that moments of friendly affection had been made to look like something more significant than they actually were. She reminded Charles that he had been occupied with parliamentary duties during that time, suggesting that her decision to seek companionship elsewhere had been driven by loneliness rather than betrayal. But Charles was prepared for these explanations. He produced additional evidence, including the vault access records that showed her repeated entries during the week of April the 18th through 22nd. He laid out the documentation showing the use of the override. A code that she should not have possessed or been able to activate. He pointed to the timestamps, the duration of her visits, and the absence of any official purpose for her presence in the vault during those times. The atmosphere in the room grew increasingly tense as Charles presented each new piece of evidence. When he brought up the missing trunk and its journey to the Windsor estate, Camilla's composure began to crack. Her explanations became more fragmented and less coherent. She struggled to maintain eye contact with Charles, and her hands trembled slightly as she attempted to organize her thoughts and formulate responses that might explain away what the evidence so clearly demonstrated. The moment that appeared to affect Charles most deeply came when he addressed the missing jewelry, particularly the items that had belonged to Diana. He spoke about the significance of these pieces, not just as valuable objects, but as connections to a woman whose memory remained powerful, within the royal family and throughout Britain. He reminded Camilla that these were items meant for William and Harry, meant eventually to be passed to their children, and that removing them from the vault represented a violation not just of property, but of family bonds and historical continuity. Charles also confronted Camilla about the pearl earrings that had been seen on her daughter Laura at a public event. He presented photographs from the event alongside archival images of Diana wearing the same distinctive pieces. The similarity was undeniable, and the timing corresponded exactly with the period when items had been removed from the vault. He asked for an explanation of how Laura had come to possess or wear jewelry that should have remained in Crown custody. At this point in the confrontation, Camilla's defenses collapsed entirely. Tears came, but they were accompanied by continued denials and claims of misunderstanding. She insisted that no harm had been intended, that she had never meant to take anything that wasn't rightfully hers, and that any appearance of wrongdoing was the result of confusion rather than deliberate action. However, her inability to provide clear explanations for the documented evidence made these protests ring hollow. Charles listened to her attempts at justification, but the trust that might have once allowed him to accept her explanations at face value had been irreparably damaged. Years of working to rebuild their public image, years of trying to establish Camilla as a respected member of the royal family, now seemed wasted. The progress they had made together had been undone by actions that suggested she had never fully understood or respected the responsibilities that came with her position. As the evening drew late and the conversation reached its inevitable conclusion, Charles made his position clear. There would be consequences for what had occurred, consequences that would be both personal and institutional. He could not simply overlook what had happened, could not pretend that private forgiveness would be sufficient when the violations touched on matters of public trust and royal heritage. The confrontation between Charles and Camilla had taken place in private, away from the eyes of staff and public alike. However, within the walls of Buckingham Palace, very little remained secret for long. Members of the royal household, though trained in discretion, could sense that something significant had occurred. The atmosphere throughout the palace had shifted perceptibly. Conversations were quieter, movements more cautious, and there was an unspoken understanding that the dynamics within the royal family were undergoing a fundamental change. It was during this period of tension that another discovery emerged, one that would prove impossible to keep contained within palace walls. On June the 29th, 2025, a small luncheon had been organised at Buckingham Palace to celebrate a charitable milestone achieved by Princess Charlotte. The event was intimate by royal standards, with only 32 guests in attendance. There were no media representatives present, no official photographers beyond those documenting the event for palace archives. It was meant to be a quiet family celebration, a moment of positive recognition away from public scrutiny. Catherine, Princess of Wales, arrived at the luncheon shortly after noon, wearing a light blue dress that royal watchers would later note had been worn by Princess Diana during a charity event in 1995. Catherine's choice of attire was deliberate, a subtle tribute to William's mother that demonstrated her understanding of symbolism and legacy. She moved through the gathering with her characteristic grace, speaking with guests and ensuring that Charlotte felt comfortable at the center of attention. However, as Catherine made her way through the room, something caught her eye. Laura Lopes, Camilla's daughter, was seated near one of the large windows that overlooked the palace gardens. She was dressed simply and appeared relaxed, engaged in conversation with other guests. But what drew Catherine's attention were the earrings Laura was wearing. They were elegant pieces, featuring 3 pearls set with diamond caps, catching the afternoon light in a way that seemed familiar to Catherine. Catherine's knowledge of royal jewellery was extensive. As Princess of Wales and future Queen Consort, she had spent considerable time studying the Crown's collection, understanding not just the aesthetic value of various pieces, but their historical significance and provenance. The earrings Laura wore triggered a memory, a connection to items she had seen documented in the royal archives. Rather than react immediately, Catherine remained composed and continued with her duties at the luncheon, but she made a mental note to investigate further. After the event had concluded and guests had begun to depart, Catherine quietly requested that her assistant retrieve the catalogue of family heirlooms from the palace archives. The catalogue arrived within the hour, and Catherine began methodically reviewing the jewellery section, specifically items that had belonged to Princess Diana. What she found confirmed her suspicions. The earrings were listed in the catalogue with detailed documentation. They had been a gift to Diana from Qatar in 1986, presented during a diplomatic visit. Diana had worn them to the London Opera on October the 14th of that year, and photographs from that evening were included in the archival records. The catalogue entry also included specific information about the earrings' unique characteristics. The serial number of the pieces, the particular design of the clasps, and the quality of the pearls all made them distinctive and easily identifiable. Most significantly, the catalogue noted that these earrings had been designated for Princess Charlotte, to be held in trust until her 18th birthday in 2043. They were part of a carefully curated collection of Diana's jewellery that had been set aside specifically for her granddaughter, items that carried both material and sentimental value. Catherine understood immediately the gravity of what she had observed. These were not earrings that should have been in anyone's possession outside of the royal vault. They certainly should not have been worn casually at a family luncheon by someone who had no legitimate claim to them. The implications were serious enough that Catherine knew she needed to proceed carefully and through proper channels. Rather than making accusations or creating a scene, Catherine arranged for the palace's jewellery expert to be consulted. This specialist, who had worked with the royal collection for decades, was shown photographs from the luncheon and asked to provide an assessment. The expert's response was unequivocal. The earrings worn by Laura Lopes were indeed the authentic pieces from the Diana collection. The expert could identify them with certainty based on several distinctive features visible in the photographs. By early evening, a more formal process had been initiated. Security records were pulled showing the last documented location of the earrings, which confirmed they had been stored in the royal vault as recently as March 2023. There was no record of them being removed for any authorized purpose, no documentation of a loan or transfer, and no explanation for how they had come to be worn by Laura Lopes at a palace event. When Prince William returned to Kensington Palace that evening, having spent the day attending to other royal duties, Catherine briefed him on what had been discovered. William's reaction was one of controlled anger mixed with deep hurt. The jewellery in question belonged to his mother, and the idea that these pieces had been taken without authorization and given to someone outside the immediate royal family represented a violation he could not overlook. The fact that the theft, if that was indeed what it was, involved his mother's belongings made the situation intensely personal. The following days saw a flurry of quiet but determined activity within the palace. King Charles was informed of Catherine's discovery, and the information was added to the existing investigation into Camilla's activities. What had begun as an inquiry into unauthorized vault access and missing heirlooms now had concrete evidence of where at least some of the missing items had ended up. The case was no longer built on circumstantial evidence and suspicions, but on direct observation and expert verification. On July 3, 2025, a meeting was convened in one of the most secure rooms within Buckingham Palace. Only 5 individuals were present: King Charles, Prince William, Princess Catherine, Princess Anne, and a senior royal advisor whose discretion was beyond question. The door was locked, and all electronic devices were removed to ensure complete privacy. What was about to be discussed would determine not just the fate of one person, but potentially the direction of the monarchy itself. Charles opened the meeting by reviewing all the evidence that had been gathered over the preceding weeks. He presented the photographs from Windsor, the vault access records, the communications between Camilla and Edward Langley, and now the discovery of Diana's earrings being worn by Laura Lopes. Each piece of evidence was examined and discussed with particular attention paid to the chain of custody for the jewellery and the lack of any legitimate explanation for how it had left the vault. Princess Anne, known throughout her life for her directness and lack of tolerance for anything that compromised the dignity of the crown, spoke with barely contained fury. She did not raise her voice, but her words carried weight. She articulated what others in the room were thinking, but perhaps hesitant to say so bluntly. This was not merely a family dispute or a personal betrayal. This was a fundamental violation of the trust that must exist between the monarch and those closest to him. It was an abuse of access and privilege that could not be overlooked or forgiven quietly. Prince William remained largely silent throughout much of the meeting, his face betraying little of what he was feeling. When he finally spoke, his words were measured but carried unmistakable pain. He pointed out that the items in question were not just valuable objects but connections to his mother, pieces she had worn and treasured, items that were meant to be preserved for his children. The fact that they had been taken and distributed without regard for their significance represented something he could not accept or move past. Catherine sat beside William, holding a newly prepared inventory of the royal vault that documented every discrepancy that had been discovered. Though she said little during the meeting, her presence communicated support and strength. She had been the one to notice the earrings, to follow through with investigation, and to ensure that the truth came to light. Her actions had been driven not by malice, but by a commitment to protecting the heritage that would one day pass to her husband and children. King Charles listened to each person in the room, absorbing their perspectives and their pain. He understood that the decision he was about to make would have lasting consequences. There could be no half measures, no attempt to quietly resolve the situation while maintaining appearances. What had occurred demanded a response that was clear and definitive. The orders Charles gave that afternoon were direct and left no room for interpretation. Effective immediately, Queen Camilla would lose her access to all royal residences beyond what was minimally necessary for basic courtesy. Her security detail, which had been provided by the Crown, would be withdrawn. The vault codes would be changed before midnight, ensuring she could never again enter those spaces without explicit authorization that would not be forthcoming. Her public duties as Queen Consort would be suspended indefinitely, and her name would be removed from upcoming royal programs and ceremonial events. Most significantly, Charles made clear that while Camilla would retain her title in name, the substance of that position would be stripped away. She would not participate in royal functions, would not represent the crown in any capacity, and would be expected to maintain a significantly lower profile. The message was unmistakable. She had forfeited her place at the heart of the monarchy through her own actions.